Well, welcome everyone. My name is Taryn Miley. I'm from the local schools. I am the elementary curriculum director, and I am just very pleased to be with you this morning. I just want to point you into the chat box. If you need anything specific during this session, please send a direct chat to me, Taryn Miley. But if you have questions or feedback for the presenter, please feel free to post those in the chat, and we will share them at a convenient time. I'm delighted to introduce you to our presenter today, Kimberly Christensen from Bowling Green State University. This is sure to be a wonderful presentation where we're going to learn how to build effective relationships with parents and guardians. Please make sure you use the chat box if you do have questions, and also place yourself on mute. If there are opportunities for interaction, the presenter will mention that to you. All right, we're ready. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Taryn, and good morning to everyone. I do see some familiar names, and if you're able and have the bandwidth to open your video, I would love to see your faces. It is so engaging when you feel like you're talking to people rather than just names. So I do appreciate if you're able to do that, and I understand that some people bandwidth is an issue and are not able to do that. So I see Tyler, Marty, and Megan, Jessica, Kelsey. Very familiar face there. Ashley and Aaron and Sarah and Jesse and Jessica. Looking to see who else I have here. I think those are the faces that I see. Well, welcome everyone. I am excited to be here today. I present widely on this topic of family advocacy, and sometimes I do it for a whole day, and sometimes I do it for a half a day. Last week I did it for 30 minutes, and that was a real stretch. So today I feel like I've been blessed with 60 minutes to really talk about something that I think is so important. Occasionally when I present, I'm talking to just parents, and I'm helping them with advocacy and empowerment skills. Other times I'm talking with just providers or professionals. And I talk across systems, not just in the education system. So I have been teaching at Bowling Green for 22 years. My area of expertise is early childhood and special education K-12. I coordinate the inclusive early childhood program here at Bowling Green. But prior to coming to Bowling Green, I taught in the public schools, and the population that I worked with were fourth, fifth, and sixth graders with significant behaviors and emotional disturbances. But all of that aside, it's really my personal experiences that perhaps more than anything else have impacted why this topic is so important to me. I have three children, and my youngest children, Bryce, at the age of 18 months, had a near drowning accident. Now, Bryce was resuscitated at the scene and flown by helicopter to a pediatric intensive care unit at Toledo Hospital. He was in very critical condition, was in fact not expected to live, but he did. He was in the deep recesses of coma. He was on a ventilator, and after about 11 days, the intensivist spoke to my husband and I and said that they no longer could keep the breathing tube through his nose. It was going to destroy his airway, and that they needed to perform surgery to insert a tracheostomy tube. 11 days after that, they said he's lost the ability to swallow. And they said then what they said, honestly, sometimes nearly every day in our stay at the hospital: your son is horribly damaged. He cannot show progress toward goals. He has poor rehabilitative potential. After 3 months, he moved from the deep recesses of coma to what was a persistent vegetative state. What this meant is his eyes were now open, but he gave no indication that he could see, no indication that he could hear. He was totally and completely unresponsive. After 3 months in the intensive care unit, the physician said that his medical condition has now maintained. They were able to wean him off of the ventilator, but not to remove the oxygen. And they wanted to know where we were going to place him. My husband and I share a very similar value system, and we were insistent we were bringing him home. So at the age of 22 months, we brought Bryce home from the hospital. What I shared with the physicians then and what we believe now is that we loved Bryce in his strengths prior to the accident, but we love him still today in his special needs. Nothing has changed. We're his parents, and we're going to advocate for him. That was 26 years ago, and that role of advocacy has grown throughout the years as we work with the medical system, as we work with Medicaid through Jobs and Family Services, as we work through early intervention in those birth to 3 years. And I sat 7 years on the Governor's Council for the Help Me Grow Advisory as a parent representative. Through the entire education system and now in adult services, navigating Social Security and vocational training. Bryce still is in our home. Now, I share that with you because what I've learned over time, that what works is when systems work together. When teachers work in concert with parents, when they identify what are our similar goals and how can we make this work. And so that is what I bring to this, that experience. So I'm going to share with you, and as the chats come in and questions or comments come in the chat, Taryn, once I start sharing my screen, I'm not able to see those. So if there is a message that comes in, I do want to make sure, oh, thank you, Kelsey. I do want to make sure that if there's a question that I can answer, I will do so. Now, there are certain times that I would have typically had a breakout room activity or a poll, but Taryn and I are realizing that neither one of us have that capability because we're not the ones who hosted this meeting. So what I am going to do is kind of work with what I have, and I am nothing if not flexible. So I hope you all are as well. Let's take a look at what I'd like to share with you today. How do we build effective relationships with parents and guardians? And that's what I'm going to be talking with you about. So the National Education Association, their core value on partnerships states something that I think is very important. And that is that we believe partnerships with parents, families, communities, and other stakeholders are essential to quality public education and student success. And so what we're going to be looking at here is recognizing that it is no one entity that makes this work, but it's all of us together, working together. So some of the objectives that I would like to accomplish today as a result of what we're seeing, and I'm going to take a second and minimize the, sorry about that. I want to get back to where I was at. The objectives is to examine our own personal perceptions and how those perceptions might set us up for relationship success or failures with parents and guardians. We'll discuss how to foster a sense of trust to establish the basis of effective partnerships. We'll discover what communication tools work best for parents and guardians. And we'll learn some strategies to promote meaningful involvement of parents and guardians in their children's educational programs. But before we do that, I'd like to know a little bit more about all of you. So if you could share your name and what your role is. I want to know who we have here today. Teachers, parents. Some of you might wear more than one hat. So please go ahead if you do. I always share that I am a parent and a professional, and those two hats are inextricably bound. A lot of familiar names here. And many of you who are also parents. Yep. All right. So I'm going to go back now. I've got a feel. We have some pre-service educators here. We have teachers, we have administrators, and we do have some parents here. So going back to look, I want to give us kind of an idea about why we're talking about this today. And this is a case for parent-teacher collaboration. Fourth grade literacy rates in the US haven't budged in 25 years. And the achievement gap keeps widening, despite billions that we're investing in classroom interventions. What Alejandro Gac-Artigas says, and he's the founder and CEO of Springboard Collaborative, is that schools must enlist families in this effort. Children don't spend nearly enough time in school for teacher-led instruction to be a complete solution. And very powerfully, he shares this analogy. He says, let's picture a child's time like an orange. Their classroom experience is just 25% of waking hours. It's the wedge that we in the education field are fixated on to keep squeezing more juice from. Yet, children spend 75% of their waking hours outside the classroom. And our nation does shockingly little to capture educational value from this time. He maintains that in order to meaningfully improve learning outcomes, our education system has to juice the rest of the orange by realizing that untapped teaching potential within families. Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. Now I'm going to stop sharing the large PowerPoint here for a moment. And I'm going to have us do an activity that typically I would do as part of a breakout room. Let me get back to all of you so I can see your faces. I want to come here and be able to look at your faces. This activity is called Examine Your Mindset. So I'm going to show the slide, and then I'm going to share a screen of some of the questions I want you to think about. Do you all have access to a pencil, paper, pen that you could write some thoughts down? Thank you. I want you to recognize that the thoughts that I'm asking you to think about are your own. You do not need to share them. Nobody's going to collect them or look at them. But I strongly, strongly encourage that you be honest as you're answering these questions and thinking about them. So our experiences in life shape our perceptions of the world around us. So it's very important that we examine our own mindsets about what we think good parenting should look like and how we think good parents should interact with teachers and how involved we think good parents should be in the educational setting. And my air quotes that I'm putting there are my own, by the way. Our perceptions will set us up for relationship success or failure. So what I'm going to share with you are the questions that typically I would send to your breakout room. And I want you to take a moment and reflect on these value statements. And again, as I said earlier, be honest with yourself. Write down what you really think, what you really feel, and really recognize that your experiences prior to today are why you're feeling the way you feel. So I want you to make a list. And number one, what qualities represent good parenting? I want you to make a list and leave space next to each trait. What qualities represent good parenting? And because I want to see your faces, I'm going to close out of that, and I am going to put the question in the chat so that you can see it. And I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Give you about 30 more seconds to write down those qualities. Remember to leave some space next to each of the traits that you've written. And the second question, what actions represent each of those qualities of good parenting? What does the trait look or sound like? So for example, if you believe in question 1 that a good parent is a good provider, then the action may be that you think good parents should be gainfully employed. So next to each of those qualities that you just identified, indicate a trait. And I have to be honest that I take my cues by looking at the ones who have their video open. So if I see you still looking down, appearing like you're writing, I'm going to pause and wait for a few more seconds. But if I see you looking up, I'll know you're ready to move on, okay? All right. Now, we talked about what qualities we think represent good parenting. Now I'm asking you what qualities represent poor parenting. Make a list, leave space next to each trait. All right, just like before, what I'd like you to do now is identify the trait. So if you already identified the quality that represents poor parenting, now what actions represent each of those qualities of poor parenting? For example, if you believe negligence is representative of poor parenting, then the action may be that you don't see parents attending school events, they don't come to conferences, they're not present at things with their children. Ah, Taryn, I do see I now have co-host responsibilities and everything has appeared at the bottom of my screen. Thank you.
No, thank Amanda Vorman. She's been the
I know, that's why I thought I saw her name on here. I was going to ask her because whoever sets it up is the host and they are the only ones who can give co-hosts. So thank you.
We've been going back and forth trying to get this to work. So
Yeah,
thank you.
no, I appreciate that. Well, and we'll make it work like we have it. So. All right. Now I'm going to give you 3 things to think about here. I think I've got them all there. How is your life experience similar or different from the students you're teaching? How is your family background similar or different from the students you are teaching? And how do these similarities or differences shape your perspective? There's 3 there, so I'm going to give you a little bit longer to put some thoughts down. Now it's time for the hardest questions. Answer them honestly. Remember, there's no reason to make excuses or rationalize because nobody's going to see this but you. And we do a disservice to ourselves if we're not honest about this. But do I truly believe that my students' parents love their children and have their best interests at heart and are doing the best job they can? And do my thoughts, my words, and my actions align with that belief that my students' parents love their children? I'm going to give you a moment to pause and think about this. And if you can, I'd like you to write a takeaway from this. And for those of you who are comfortable sharing that takeaway or thought about anything I've just asked you, go ahead and put it in the post. But especially if you would unmute and kind of talk with us about how you're thinking. Thank you, Kelsey, for sharing.
Kim, I'm gonna talk because I just thought it'd be easier than having
I
to type it.
know that is absolutely fine. Some people are more comfortable sharing and writing and others, and I'm kind of like you, Tyler. I just like to talk. So go ahead.
Kind of thinking about it and like thinking, kind of how the way I grew up and like now where, I teach at Springfield and thinking about, I'm just thinking of my 9 kids on my caseload this year. I would say all of their parents, generally love them and want the best for them. I just think, each kid is dealt cards very differently. Um, and that's hard. And it's you have to take a step back and to really think, if they're struggling in school and if you're not getting any parent communication, why that is. And I think, answering these questions, and leading up to this was really good, thinking about that. So yeah, it's just it just has me thinking a lot.
I appreciate that, Tyler. See, others of you are posting in the chat. Those of you who are posting in the chat, do you feel comfortable kind of sharing what you're thinking or any comments to what Tyler just said or to what somebody else has said?
I kind of agree with like what Tyler said too. I believe that all of my parents really do love their children. They just show it in different ways. Not everyone is going to have the same kind of background that I grew up in, and not everyone is going to have the same background that their neighbor grew up in. It really just depends on how their families react to their children. Like, I just think they love at different rates and at different kinds of places in their life.
Mhm.
I just think that education is really underutilized in terms of healthy parenting. Being a good parent is not really something we're born with. I think it's something that we have to learn about and continually grow and build and admit when we've made mistakes and be willing to apologize to our children. Um, Nobody is perfect. And I think as a parent, I know what I've lived, and I had to educate myself a lot on the lives and the things that my students are experiencing. And I really agree with, it's not just one person's responsibility to raise a child. It shouldn't fall solely on the parent. And I think a lot of parents are made to feel guilty if they can't do it on their own. So that makes them more likely to avoid asking for help, avoid trying to build that village. And unfortunately, those traumas that an adult may have faced will carry on and develop in their own children because they don't know what else to do with it.
I'm seeing a lot of head nodding. Ashley, I saw your head nodding a lot. Do you have something to add to it?
Sure. This really reminded me of a book I read a long time ago about the 5 love languages. And I tend to think that every individual has their preferences for the way they want to be loved and then the way they know how to love best. And I think sometimes there's a discrepancy between the way students want love from their parents and the way they express that. And so we always have to be very conscientious about that and how like we have to give them words of affirmation. We have to make sure, we're supporting them in their weaknesses, and we have to make sure we're recognizing, okay, this is what you did well. And it's the same thing even with parents. Like you have to interact with parents on different levels. And because the definition of love is so like relative depending on who you're talking to, we have to be very, I think, careful about whether or not we determine if a parent loves their child or not.
I just want to piggyback on that too. Being a mother of 2 kids, I think that it's really important as parents to recognize that what works with one child may not work with the other child, and be willing to adapt and, kind of fly by the seat of your pants in certain situations when it comes to showing your love or effective discipline and things like that. Because there isn't a one size fits all for kids.
And there isn't in relationships that teachers have with the parents that are of the children in their classroom. We don't have a one size fits all for our relationships with those parents. They all come to us with different needs, different strengths, different ways they want to receive information, different ways they want to be involved.
So I'll be willing to share.
Thank
I
you.
taught for 18 years at an elementary school, and I really tried to forge positive relationships and not be judgmental, because they would see, me as an educated person, but I had to break down those barriers and really listen to them, and then share my personal story about my family going through a divorce and how that affected me, especially with single moms and how I was raised by a single mom. That really kind of resonated with some of my families when I shared my personal experiences and then said, how can I help? I recognize your child is really struggling with the divorce, or, different parenting arrangements. It's just really I think being vulnerable, willing to share your own personal story, and just that being empathetic. I mean, just really loving your kids and meeting them in the middle, because they may have had a very poor experience in school, and so my job as that teacher was to break that barrier and let them know, I'm here for your kid. I love your child. I want to do what's best. So tell me your story, and then I'll tell you mine. So I think it's really powerful to share your story if you're willing.
Agreed. Kimberly, I'd like to share, and I'm sorry my video's not on, but
Oh,
as I
no, you're
explained to
fine. And Lori, I saw you on, so hello.
I explained earlier, I got up late and it's Saturday morning, so
you
the
go.
picture's much better than what the actual appearance is right
I
now.
love Zoom though. See, you only have to do it from the waist up.
That's all right.
matter what
It was a rough morning trying to get up. I have a lot going on.
All right,
So
please share.
yeah, so I put in the chat box that, I work for Toledo Public Schools. I've been for 26 years. I've been was a teacher all the way up to central admin right now. I had my own building for 8 years. I'm also the mom of two, they're now adults, 19 and 22. But my 19-year-old has special needs and was diagnosed at 3 with autism. And it changed my whole perspective as an educator, changed my perspective as a parent. I used to tell my staff, and I worked in a inner city elementary school, and I used to say to my staff, I'd hear them, and I understand where the frustration would come from, and they'd be like, well, they don't care, they don't do this, they don't do that. I said, well, I just need you to stop. I said, okay. I said, I have 4 college degrees. I have my doctorate, I have a master's, two bachelors. I said, I don't have time to do homework with my children. I don't have time to do it. We actually wrote in Lucas's IEP, no homework, because I'd rather stick myself in the eye with a pencil than sit down with him, because I was mom. He didn't want to do that with me. And I had to sit there. I said, I miss things all the time. I mean, there's a paper I didn't sign. I said, what does that? And here I am. You're stigmatizing our parents because you think they're not educated. You think that they don't have time. You think that they don't have, they don't love them. I said, you have to remember where our parents are coming from. I said, sometimes I'm so frustrated and so stressed out and so not knowing what to do that I just stop doing things, and it's like an emergency room. Which one goes first? The hangnail or the broken thumb versus the, you just had an amputation. It's like, you have to really think. You just have to really think of where we come from. It doesn't have anything to do with education. You just have to remember, this is the best kid at this time that you have in front of you, the best that we can do.
Yep.
And if you look at it that way, I think it changes our perspective.
Yep.
And it changes our expectations. And it really gives a different view. And it took me many years to figure that out. I have 2 very different parenting styles with both of my kids. One has to have it this way, and the style I parent with Lucas is totally different than the style I parent with Ryan, because Lucas doesn't understand the language I would use with Ryan. And I think if we just use that perspective as an educator, especially like, how would you want somebody to treat your own children?
Absolutely.
So when I would go in, to have those conversations with school, that's the conversation I would have. And it's just, these are somebody's kiddos.
Mhm.
These are somebody's kids. And let's think about how you would want somebody to treat your own children.
Yeah.
And that just changes our whole relationship and your whole perspective.
Well, I think, Lori, what you're sharing and what Taryn had touched on as well is one of the things that I've shared for years with my students, that I think the single most important quality that a teacher needs to have is to be non-judgmental, because we are so quick to find dysfunction in other people. And yet, if we're honest, every one of us has dysfunction in our own life. And we need to be really understanding of that and what that experience is that families are coming to us with. I want to share I love that and believe me, as you are thinking of these things, please put them in the chat because they stimulate other people to think about it. And I want to kind of throw some other things at you to begin to think about and see kind of where we go with this discussion. I'm really open to how we move forward here. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you is what the research from a Special Education Parent Center said. And that is that just about all families care about their children. They want them to succeed, and they're eager for them to obtain a better information from schools and communities so they can remain good partners in their children's education. And equally, they went on to say that all teachers and administrators want to involve families, but many do not know how to go about building that positive and productive programs. And consequently, they're fearful about trying. And I love that picture there because I think when we look at any one of us, if we think back when our first teaching experience, those first few years, we felt very much like you see this picture. Can you help me, Mrs. Martin? This wasn't covered in any of my education courses. As a group of parents are eager, they're ready to burst into this classroom. One of the models that I've used, and this is really the seminal work in what has informed our knowledge about the school, family, and community partnerships, and that's the work of Joyce Epstein and her 6 types of involvement. Now, my email is in the chat, not in the chat, it's on the first page, and I'm going to put it in the chat. But I have a lot of information here, and I like this information because a lot of what she presents is very reader friendly to begin to think about these 6 types of involvement: parenting, communicating, volunteering, learning at home, decision-making, collaborating with community. And one of the things that she's put together is a table that helps us to really begin to think about this. Some sample practices when we are addressing the concept of parenting or communicating or volunteering. Then goes on to talk about what the challenges are and how we might redefine how we think about each of these categories that are mentioned here. And as a result of that redefining, what are the improved results for students? What are the improved results for parents? And what are the improved results for teachers? One of the things we have to recognize, and I think Lori, you touched on that when you talked about, for example, helping with homework, is that there are absolutely some parental roadblocks to involvement. We have demanding family schedules. It's difficult to think, how are we going to have any more time in our lives? And I think the pandemic has done nothing but make this more challenging. And then one of you, and I think it was you, Taryn, talked a little bit about this, that discomfort that parents might have when communicating with school officials and some of those past experiences that parents may have had with school themselves. I've heard parents say that the minute they go into a school building, they feel like they're back in school, and school had not been a good experience for them. Communication when there are language or cultural differences. And the lack of knowledge parents may feel they have, or resources that they may have access to help their children. And in some cases, what parents communicate is this frustration with school bureaucracies or policies that they're just not sure that they understand, nor that they know how to change. And the complaints that they rarely hear from the school unless there's a problem with their child's behavior or performance. And think about that. and how often it is that we have to reach out when there is a problem that's happening in school. And do we counterbalance that with every time that we need to provide that information about a challenge or a problem at school, with 2 additional times that we share information that might be strong and that our things are going well. The other thing that parents will talk about is the educational jargon and that alphabet soup of acronyms that we use. The incomprehensible or inability to read or understand English. And I think I heard you saying, Taryn, too, that sometimes, and I don't know in cases if this is a true perception, if it's really happening, or if it's what the parent feels, is that there's an insensitivity to single parents or grandparents or foster parents or other caregivers. Additionally, the lack of transportation that families might have, or the lack of childcare. So perhaps they want to be involved, but they don't have that time or that ability to be able to fit that into their schedule. What I'd like to do now, because we had such good discussion before and we've talked a little bit about where we're thinking, we're not going to have this set up as a poll because we didn't have the ability to do this prior, but I am going to share my screen again, and I'm going to share this with you. And I want you to think about it a moment and look at those 10 truths that are mentioned there. And is there one truth that especially resonates with you? Parents have hopes and goals for their children. Home is just one of several spheres that shape a child. The parent is a central contributor to the child's education. Parent involvement must be legitimate. Parent involvement is a process. Parent interaction with their children is a cornerstone of involvement. Parent involvement requires vision, policy, and a framework. Most barriers to parent involvement are in school practices. Any parent can be hard to reach. And finally, successful parent involvement nurtures relationships and engagement. I want you to think about those for a moment, and I want you to tell me, is there one truth, and put that in the chat, is there one truth that resonates with you? And I put those truths back in the chat for you to look at. All right, so I am seeing several of you posting that there's a particular truth that resonates with you. Would you feel comfortable sharing about that?
I can. I put number 1, and I think it's just because I, with my working with students on IEPs, and I need to have parent involvement as well as that. And with the transition goals that we work on, I give my parents a questionnaire, and they do have really good hopes and goals for their children. And I like seeing those. And I like discussing them with the parent as well, and not just brushing them off as a check mark item for the IEP. So even if I feel like I'm not getting a lot of communication or there's no involvement, I still can get one piece from the parent, and it helps drive that IEP for that student.
Okay, thank you, Tyler. Others that have listed some. Scott, you mentioned truth 2. Do you feel comfortable sharing about it?
Yeah, I can do that. Sorry about that. I wasn't hitting my the right button there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I put down number 2. Is that the one that you said?
Yes, home is
Okay.
one of several spheres
Yeah,
shaping.
absolutely. I think there are a lot of people that are influencing and shaping students, not just the teachers, certainly the parents, and whatever they're doing at home. I mean, we mentioned before, I think it was 25% of the time is education time with children. So that's 75% that is not. And we're
Yeah.
with the kid, we're in high school, we're with the kid 1 hour a day. They're in the high school 7 hours a day. That leaves them, 16 or 17 or 18 hours where they're at home, um, or outside of the school. So there are several different areas that are certainly influencing um, the children beyond what we're doing in the school.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. That analogy or that metaphor really does back that up. I see several of you said 9. Any parent can be hard to reach. Anyone feel comfortable about sharing about that? See, Lisa said 9.
I'd talk about that, Kimberly.
Oh, go right ahead, Lori. Thank you.
From 2 points of view. I'll talk about being a parent. We've just had an experience, with Lucas. He's socially graduated with his class last year. He was in a transition. He's in the transition between, 18 to 22 in a program. We sent him off to Penna. That was our hope and dream since grade 5. It was a huge struggle for us. I just, the teacher, good, bad, or indifferent, I don't believe was interested in our experiences nor our understanding of our own child. And, just kind of shut down, which I shut down too. Cause I was like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. What I do. B, you're not understanding of it, nor the almost 20 years of experience I've had with my child. And you're not willing to listen to the whole team who knows him. And we both, I was done. She reached out to me and I wouldn't even respond anymore because I just couldn't, because I didn't want it to get that unprofessional, which is where it was headed. And I just stopped. Sometimes I get so overwhelmed, and we have to remember that, even now it's like, it's just overwhelming, can be overwhelming. Also, coming from an educator point of view, I would tell my staff, you have to understand where our parents are coming from. Just, you don't know what's going on. We just know a little piece of them. We don't know what's going on. And it may not be, that may not be the way to reach them. I think one of the things that resonated with me was when you said, making that contact. If you don't make those positive contacts and build that relationship with them first, they're not going to help you no matter what. So when it comes for the time for help, that's when you say, I need your help now. Can you help me? And they know that you care about their kid, not just there to, lack of a, in quotes, complain about them. So I think we just have to keep all of that in mind, and just, regardless of the relationship, sometimes it can be hard to reach that parent at that time in their, in their world, just because of everything that's going on. And we just have to be very cognizant of that, and how we, both sides of the table, just both, educator and as a parent.
Yeah. The next thing I've kind of moved ahead a little bit, because a lot of what you all are talking about are really understanding how can we engage families, understanding what everybody is experiencing now. And I want to share with you it's really, this work was done by MAP, called Do School Leaders Make a Difference? And they talk about a paradigm shift, about really how we can redefine what it means to engage families. And one of the things they do is they share what is the difference between involving parents and truly engaging parents. So when schools involve parents, they're leading with their institutional self-interest and desires. This is our strategic plan. This is what we'd like to accomplish. Let's involve parents in helping us to accomplish this. Yet when we engage parents, they're leading with the parents' self-interest, what the parents' wants and dreams are, in an effort to develop a really genuine partnership. They go on to say that when we involve parents, school staff sometimes find themselves falling into the role of a social worker. We start to do things for parents, or we tell them what they should be doing with their child. In contrast, when we engage parents, school staff act more as community organizers. They help parents do things for themselves, and they elicit from parents their ideas about what parents and school staff could be doing better to help the child and the community. Again, going back to when we involve parents, schools tend to focus on supporting students by strengthening and assisting school programs and priorities. Yet when we engage parents, schools support students by developing parent relationships and often working with parents to improve their local communities. And finally, when we involve parents, the parent is generally directed towards completing tasks selected by the school staff, or the parent may be a client who receives services and information. Yet when we engage parents, they're challenged to do something about what they feel is important to them. Staff learn what parents believe through developing that relationship. I want to take a moment here, and this is kind of recognizing that we all have ways that we like to receive information, how we like to take it in, and how we like to give back information. And there are some possible preferences that you may have. What I want you to do is to look at these statements, and I'm going to stop sharing for one moment because I'm going to minimize my screen so that I can see your faces while you're looking at these statements. And I want you, again, it's easier if you have an actual copy of this, but we don't have ability to give you these handouts. I'd like you to look at them, and I would like you to identify the 6 or 8 statements that really identify or describe you best. Are you able to all see them, or is my screen too small for you to see them? Just want to stop for a second. Are you all able to see those when I had them up? Okay, I apologize. When I see you, when I have my whole screen up, I'm not able to see what it is you are saying. And I want to make sure that you're able to see them. I'm going to put them back up again for you, okay? And I am going to make my view a little bigger so I can see you all while I'm doing this.
Kim, if you put it in presentation mode, the items will be a little easier to read.
They are. The only problem is I lose your faces. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in presentation mode just so that you can read it more easily. That's why I wanted to check to see. Oops, sorry. Back to where I was. So you're circling the 6 to 8 statements that describe you best. I can see a few of your faces. So if you could give me a thumbs up if you've identified the 6 to 8, I'll know that I can go, okay, good. Now, I want you to watch a second here. I'm going to take my pen. If doggone it. Get my pen back again. And I'm going to draw a line from this star down to this star to form 2 quadrants. And then I'm going to draw a line from this star to form 4 quadrants. Where did more of the statements you circled fall? Which quadrant? Kind of make it messy here. This is reading. This is listening. Over here, we have speaking. Down here, rather, is speaking, and this is writing. So did you find yourself falling in more statements that you circled that were reading, more that were listening, more that were writing, or more that were speaking? So if you did that, I want to ask you for a second, what is your preferred communication style? Which one did you fall within? If you could go ahead and put that in the chat. And Taryn, are we here till 11:45?
Yes.
That's what I
11:45.
thought. Good. We have about 3 minutes to identify. Good. Speaking with writing is a close second. Some said listening. So as you're writing these down and thinking about them, the same is true for the families we work with. And yet recognize that sometimes what we do is we present information from the way that we learn best, or the way that it works best for us to communicate, and perhaps not thinking as much about what works best for the families that we have. So having said that, again, we're going to really want to hear what you all have to say. What's your takeaway about communication and how you might want to share information with families in the future?
I think that when you are speaking to someone, you can kind of see their like body language a little better. I think that's why I take away from like speaking directly to someone rather than like a phone call even. You can kind of see how they're reacting to whatever you're telling them, and you can kind of see their opinion on it because their facial expression will be completely different. Now, if you're texting or emailing or anything like that, you won't get that. And I think that's why I rather speak with someone than any other type of mode of communication.
Do we have time for one other thought?
I can
As you
share.
look at-
Very
Go ahead,
quickly,
Tim.
yeah. Oh, yeah, very quickly.
Sure. I prefer email, but the world of COVID has opened up Zoom for communicating with parents. And so now when I'm discussing their child or my student, I give them the choice of communicating over email or Zoom. And that's gone outside of my comfort zone, but I think better to give the parents a choice.
You know, that's interesting as we close here is that Colin Steele's done a lot of work, and there's been a lot of research done in the last several months about COVID. And what he stated is that parent involvement has always mattered, but will the COVID-19 pandemic finally make this the new normal in K-12 education? And I'm going to go ahead and again put my email here for all of you. I have a lot of things that I can share with you about how to deal with difficult parents, how to have conversations that are uncomfortable, but also recognizing that research that is coming from the pandemic that is really helping us to understand how we might in the future see parents even more engaged and more empowered because of their involvement during the pandemic with their children learning at home. So thank you all. I appreciate being asked to be here. Taryn?
Thank you so much, Kimberly. A lot of great ideas and strategies. We really appreciate all of your wealth of knowledge. A couple of reminders. Amanda has placed the link to the main room, so make sure that you grab that link or look on your schedule. And you can also save the chat. If you look at the 3 dots to the right in the chat box, the very top actually lists the save chat option, and then you can save everything, including the links and email that Kimberly shared. Okay, we'll see you all back in the main room. Thank you so much. It was
Bye now.
great to meet you, Kimberly. Thank you.
Bye now.